I think many of you know that my advocacy has been born from the experiences of everyday parents and fellow citizens that I've heard from over the course of years. New Jersey has the highest rate of autism in the entire nation, and so for me it is a moral imperative to find ways in which we can respond to that challenge. New Jersey certainly informs me in a way that helps inform our national advocacy on these issues. So together we came as one, as autism advocates, and we're on the heels of a victory that just took place in the 2018 appropriations bill, where we fought to make sure that the legislation that I authored and passed, which is the Autism Cares Act back in 2014, got not only fully funded, but got an increase. That landmark legislation That landmark legislation invested in a wide range of areas aimed at better assisting youth with autism as they age into adulthood and need new resources and support systems to lead healthy, independent lives. That 2018 appropriations package we just passed weeks ago includes $2 million in additional funding for the Autism Care Initiative, bringing the total to nearly $50 million. Now, winning that increase and getting full funding and an increase was no small job in this political climate that we're in. Unfortunately, the President sent us a budget that proposed defunding, not increasing, but defunding the Autism Cares legislation that I wrote, and dramatically slashed the Center for Disease Control funding to investigate both birth defects and developmental disorders in our research to understand the causes. And once we understand causes, then we can work to find cures and prevention. So I had the opportunity to ask the Secretary of Health and Human Services why the President's budget would eliminate critical Medicaid payments for autism services. And he said it was part of their efforts to, and I quote, scale down their commitment to the Affordable Care Act. And I had to shake my head. Scaling down and zeroing out funding are two very different things. And now is not the time to zero out funding for autism care initiatives when we have seen a constant increase in our country of those fellow citizens who face a challenge in the autism spectrum. Now, fortunately, we won this battle, and at the same time, we preserved funding for critical autism research underway at the Centers for Disease Control and the Department of Defense. Likewise, I was glad to vote for a bill that included a measure known as Kevin and Avante's Law. Kevin and Avante's Law amends the Criminal Control and Law Enforcement Act of 1994 to ensure that first responders, law enforcement, schools, and communities are better prepared to help children with autism spectrum disorders get home safely if they become separated or wander off from their caregivers. Too often, a police officer comes on a scene, doesn't know the person has in the autism spectrum, and all of a sudden finds the person maybe not cooperative under the standard way and finds themselves in a confrontation. We need to avoid those confrontations and sensitize and educate those first responders to the challenges of those on the autism spectrum. And I'm glad that Michelle mentioned Medicaid. I was one of the authors of the Affordable Care Act, which some people call Obamacare. From my perspective, it's okay to call it Obamacare because Obama did care. That's why we have more health care today than the past. But one of the critical things that I worked for as a member of the Senate Finance Committee was to expand Medicaid coverage to many people in our country who work hard every day. They go to work every day, but they don't get insurance at work, and they don't make enough money to buy insurance. And so for New Jersey alone, that meant 500,000 more New Jerseyans who have coverage under Medicaid expansion than not. And it is these services, that Michelle rightfully pointed out to me, that is being paid by Medicaid. And but for that expansion, there'd probably be a lot less people who would be covered. These are all positive steps forward, but I'm not satisfied. We have more work to do. The Autism Care Act expires later this year. It has an expiration date, and we're going to have to work hard to try to secure its reauthorization so we can keep these programs alive. We can't take things for granted, even though I'm proud to say that one of the things that has some very significant bipartisan support is meeting our challenges on the autism spectrum. But having learned of what just happened last fall with the Children's Health Insurance Program, which also at one time had bipartisan support but lapsed, it ended, we had to fight for its renovation, its renewal. We can't take anything for granted. So I'm glad that we were able to fight for a 10-year renewal. I'd like to get a 10-year renewal for the Autism Cares Act. So I appreciate the parents of our fellow citizens who are here. You're critically important in the advocacy for your loved one and for others on the autism spectrum. You're going to have to raise your voices to make sure that we get the right authorization at the end of the day. And it's not as if the challenges posed by autism are going away. The numbers are pretty extraordinary. According to figures released by the CDC, about 1 in 68 children is diagnosed with an autism spectrum disorder. In New Jersey, it's even more prevalent. Instead of 1 in 68, it's 1 in 41 children. These numbers have been our call to action, and they remind us that we cannot be complacent. So we've got to keep up the pressure. We've got to keep expanding research, screening, and support services for Americans with autism. And I truly believe that our nation is stronger when we ensure that our children, no matter what zip code they're born in, no matter how much money their families make, or what kind of developmental disorder they have, ultimately have the opportunity to achieve their God-given potential. And this is a place where that is happening. And for those affected by autism spectrum disorders, that commitment must last into adulthood, which is my next effort. Beyond the Medicaid expansion is the other services that it shouldn't be that a date on a calendar suddenly has you fall off, the edge of the services that are necessary to continue the spectrum of life opportunities. So that commitment has to last into adulthood with strong support systems that can lead healthy, independent, and fulfilling lives. What we cannot ever do is leaving New Jersey families wondering if only we had invested in the right diagnostic tools and better early intervention techniques and the discovery of new therapies and support strategies, what would be the life of my child? We cannot have that question as the pending question. The pending question must be, have we done everything possible to ensure that we know what that is? That's the entire mission behind the Autism Cares Act. It's a mission that I am still committed to, and I really appreciate the work that you do here each and every day.